Today, I want to talk about Gaza. So let's get right into it. As of today, the latest death toll in Gaza has reached over 60,000 people, according to some of the latest from sources like PBS and Al Jazeera. It's estimated to be much more, but that is around what they're saying. And then they're also saying that about half of that is women and children. So let that sink in. As for me, what I want to say about this is that I will never forgive those that stayed silent. I will never forgive the governments, the leaders that not only allowed it, but worked to promote it and to say that this was right. I will never forgive the false narrative that applauds a genocide ever. And so the inaction and the also the support, not only will it go down in infamy, but that's not what matters to them today. Today they are bloated with greed, their faces inflamed with hate. And so this is why this week we are focused on Gaza and what we can do actively, what actions we can take to help them in their struggle. Concrete actions that lead to the end of the genocide. I interviewed Libre, who is an activist, Puerto Rican activist that is on the ground and working with Glia International organization to help with the logistics there. And I'm going to let him share his story within the interview. But what struck me is just how connected the diaspora is, the diaspora of Puerto Ricans, with the shared struggles of Palestine, as well as the people here. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that and to realize that the true villain of the story might seem separate from us, but were it not for the American stamp on the very bombs that hit these tiny, tiny infants in these hospitals and babies who are just sleeping on their mother's breast. So I want to reiterate 60,000 lives, 60,000 souls are gone. And so this week, I really want to focus on the conversation I had with him and give you guys some tools and some ideas on how you can be involved. And there's organizations and there's places you can go, different things you can do. But we've grown tired of waiting for others to do something. So we have to be very vocal about the fact that we're the majority here. We are the majority, even while the Wizard of Oz at the White House is trying to paint a different picture, as we saw from the images for his little military birthday parade. People do not support what he's doing. They want us to think that there is half of the population or half of the US that supports him, but I think it's clear, right? And we have to keep remembering that they're going to use every kind of, they're going to twist things, they're going to doctor the photos on the crowds that were there, just to seem like they're more powerful than they are. But the truth is that we're the majority. So I appreciate you all for being here. I really do. And just ask that you please subscribe to the podcast. That helps me continue to do this work. We need a lot of eyes and ears on this topic. So please share it. Please become involved. We want to show Palestinian people that we recognize them. We recognize them as a place, as a nation, and as a people who matter to us. They really do. So let's show them what we're capable of. The bombs being dropped in Gaza were tested in Vieques. So our struggles are connected. And let's never forget that. And lastly, I just want to say I appreciate all of the support that people have been giving me on here. I don't want to cry, but it just fills me really with so much love and this appreciation, because it's not easy to do this work at all. And it does take its toll, but it's something I do gladly and with so much love for the community, because we need it. There shouldn't just be one person. It shouldn't just be me either. There should be more, like more voices to overtake this, cacophony, this crazy amount of narrative and podcasts out there that do not speak truth to power. So let's continue to change that. Let's continue to do something about it. Anyway, with that, I'll leave you with the interview. I hope you enjoy it and I hope you get a lot from it.
The situation keeps on getting worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's currently there's only 3 functioning public hospitals in all of Gaza, 2 in the south, Al-Aqsa and Nasser, which we have a nurse, ER nurse at Nasser, and then there's Al Shifa in the north. So of the 36 public hospitals for 2 million people, all have been completely or partially destroyed, and only 3 are accessible right now, and they're becoming less accessible because they just issued evacuation orders all around Nasser 2 days ago, which is a sign. They just did it to Indonesian in the north, where they gave evacuation orders, but they said not the hospital. And then now the hospital is under siege and they can't get patients. So there's an intentional attack on public infrastructure, anything that would provide quality of life, that would allow Gazans to stay here, like healthcare, education, uh, housing. Right, 92% of homes have been completely destroyed in the Gaza Strip, um, and yeah, I mean, there's just it's an intentional. I mean, this is why it's genocide. There's levels to the attempts at erasure of the Palestinian people of Gazans, not only to displace them, but to make their best option leaving. And it's not
Right.
really an option, because the option is you stay here and you risk dying or having to live another genocide, and there's no universities, and most jobs don't pay, and there's no public infrastructure. You don't get access to water. Now you're completely dependent on aid. Why? Because the Israelis, the Zionist forces, have destroyed over 80% of the farming land intentionally, so that the Palestinians would have to be dependent on aid. And this is exactly what the U.S. has done to our people, in Borikén, right? They made us. We used to grow our own food and have our own crops, which is what was happening here less than 2 years ago, right? They were self sufficient, growing their own food, and now the cattle has been the livestock has been intentionally attacked. The land that you can grow food on has been intentionally attacked. So now they're dependent on canned food and not nutritious food, right? They're used to
Exactly.
the fresh food, and now I'm showing them how I used to cook this canned food, right? This canned meat and stuff, because that's how I grew up. That's what growing up poor means, right? In our context, and here it's a new thing, because they're used to coming together and eating fresh food, and now it's this reality of not only are you dependent on aid, but for the last 86 days, there's been a total blockade of all things coming into Gaza, which has created the reality that we live in now, where after almost 3 months of no aid coming in, the little bit that is coming in, is coming in, but intentionally being looted by people that are protected by the Israelis, and they're saying it's another group that's taking it, but it's not. And then the people that are going to this entity called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation are being massacred. There has not been one aid distribution that they've actually successfully done, or where there wasn't a massacre of people. The latest one being this morning, where 27 people were massacred by the Israelis, and the people that are distributing aid are are veterans, former special force U.S. military. Everyone has guns, and so the reality, people that don't live in the genocide are like, oh well, why would you go if you know they're gonna kill you? You haven't been starving for 3 months, so you wouldn't know
Mm.
what it's like when your children are asking you for food and you have to go 3 or 4 days without food, and then there's this opportunity to possibly get something that you can give to your family or to your children, and then you end up becoming a shaheed. It's martyr, a martyr, right? Which is the case. I was watching a boy cry, right, because his mom and his 8 siblings were mourning their mom, because their mom went to go get food for them, and she was shot in the head by a sniper while she was going to get while she was going to get aid. And the problem with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not only that it was founded with the Israelis, with their backing, which is why the security for the humanitarian sites, the aid distribution sites, are the IOF, and there's biometrics. Um, um, uh, but uh, so, but it militarizes humanitarian aid, which goes against our principles, right?
Yeah, using people's desperation to, yeah, to basically imprison them, find them, and you know, I wanted to ask you too in terms of the aid, right? Because we've been seeing, again, because of the blockade, we've been seeing how they're using it as a tool, as a weapon. They're using starvation as a weapon. I did see in the news about Greta there's a flotilla that's coming, blockade. So what have you seen in terms of that, and how does that kind of factor into the work that's going on in terms of people trying to come inside and trade?
It is okay. So I work with Glia. It's a Canadian-based medical solidarity organization. We've been functioning since February of last year, bringing in emergency medical teams. Um, and I'm here doing logistics for the health workers that we bring in. And it has been what I've seen are waves of people of healthcare workers, but also humanitarian aid workers not being allowed in
Right.
intentionally to make the situation harder, to make it so that they can tell their lie and it seems more believable instead of having the testimonies of doctors or healthcare workers that are saying no, these people were intentionally shot in the head or in the neck. We are seeing children with missing limbs because of explosions. So which is the premise of the ICJ court ruling, which we would hope. Unfortunately, international law does not apply to either the U.S. Or the Zionist colonial project of Israel. So there's the double standard of international law because if it was applied, there would be sanctions on
Right.
Israel, and the U.S. would face charges for being complicit with genocide by sending working people's tax dollars to completely destroy and decimate a whole population. We're talking about U.S. dollars and U.S. weapons dropping the amount of 6 tons of atomic bombs in this year and a half that the genocide has been happening. Um, or 20 months, sorry, the 20 months that this genocide has been happening. That's 233 tons of explosions that have been dropped in this very small strip of land. Um, and so,
Increíble.
um, the it is there's a total blockade. So there's a blockade of the air, right? I can hear this drone above me. That's part of the blockade, right? It's ensuring, it's surveilling people, right, in this very um, not comfortable way, and it's very loud. And we have to get used to this. We have to get used to things that are not normal, but we have to normalize them because it's just the everyday reality of being in a
Exactly.
genocide. Um, there's a blockade of the land, so the Gaza Strip is cut off from the rest of occupied Palestine, but it's also cut off from Jordan, from Egypt, and Lebanon. So nothing can enter or go out without their permission, and there's a complete blockade of the water, which Boricuas should be familiar with because something similar was applied to us under maritime law when the U.S. Navy was occupying Vieques from 1941 until I believe 2006. And so there's a complete limitation of the land that you can be in, and in that limitation, just to be clear, during this current time, 82% of the Gaza Strip is under evacuation orders or in a military zone or a red zone, which means 82% of the Gaza Strip is not accessible to 2 million people. We're supposed to all fit in 18% of the Gaza Strip. And what they're trying to do is push everyone towards the water, west towards the water, and down towards Rafah, so that if they open the borders, they can leave, which is what they want. They want to displace them so that they can have their beaches. That may sound familiar to Boricuas and any Caribbean person, really. Um, and it's disgusting to see, to witness. We had to forcibly evacuate um, uh, just about 2 weeks ago, and this is us in conditions where we have access to a car, and we were able to kind of grab our things in a rush while there was bombs and shooting happening, but with a car, right? Most people are on foot,
Right.
and they're living in tents, and you literally just have to grab whatever you can and go. And every time you have to evacuate, some people have had to evacuate 15 times, and each time they go, they take less and less things. This is how you strip a people, right, of their memories, right? And the only thing that they're able to carry with them is is the memories of what was. Imagine a reality where your past that you lived was better than your current reality, and your current reality is getting progressively worse and worse, and you feel more and more isolated. And right now, there are a few initiatives. I would say there needs to be more pressure to open the borders. There are over almost 200 nation states that are part of the UN that can do something and are choosing not to, no matter what they say.
Choosing.
They're choosing to do nothing. The only place that is doing something is Yemen, but it's not using the UN in terms of tangible things, right? Um, uh, and uh, and in terms of trying to break the siege in the water, there's the Freedom Flotilla. Right now, there are 12 people from representing a few different nations. One is my comrade Tiago from Brazil, and they're coming to break the siege. The Freedom Flotilla has been something that has been happening for a long time now, and the goal is to bring in. Right now, they're on the Madeline, um, and they are trying to break the siege through the water by bringing this boat in an attempt to bring direct aid to the people, and break the siege on Gaza through the sea. It's a wonderful effort, and I hope and wish them safety and success. It would be a beautiful morale booster for Gazans, um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and for them as well. I mean, recently their other ship that they were supposed to bring that was a lot bigger was attacked by an Israeli drone in the Malta Sea, and the Maltese government has done nothing about it. Again, double
Yeah.
standards.
That's what I guess I wanted to ask you in terms of, the people who are like me, unable to necessarily, let's say, if we can't be on a flotilla, if we can't, volunteer, what other ways can the people, right? Because you mentioned there needs to be more pressure because a lot of these countries are doing absolutely nothing, even in the face of very blatant genocide. So, we want to know what ways that are tangible, and obviously that's not on you to tell us how to do that. But if there's anything that you can share with us in terms of things you've heard or resources that we can, because again, I've even same thing about the aid. It's like even if we wanted to give money or if we wanted to send aid, it sounds like they're just preventing any kind of help from coming in. So what are some ways, besides amplifying obviously, but what are some ways that are tangible, right? Because we're all so frustrated. I think people have talked about calling your government, showing up. Like I think that's another major way, but anything that you can add to that would be helpful.
The genocide is a tangible thing. In order to end the genocide, we need tangible things. Although the non-tangible things seem are a little bit easier. Everyone has a role, right? Based off of what they can do. What I will say is I want to pressure anyone that's listening to stop feeling comfortable, because it doesn't feel comfortable to be here trying to help people while we're being intentionally starved, being bombed, and people are being massacred. in schools, in hospitals, at so-called distribution sites by Israeli U.S. Aid distribution sites. So we don't get the luxury of turning our phones off to forget the images. We live the images. We don't get the luxury of turning our phones off and going to sleep. I haven't gotten a single day of rest since I've been here, and I've only been here a year and a month, right? So I've only been here 13 months of the genocide. The Palestinians are feeling it even more. And so we need tangible things. There are organizations like Palestinian Action that are doing tangible things to shut down Elbit, and they have shut down Elbit, like some of the Elbit locations. There's BDS. Currently, we're actually doing a campaign. There was a ship, HC Opal, that that had the Antigua and Barbuda flag on it. It's a shipping vessel that flies a flag to go to a destination. Now, the flag on there was Antigua and Barbuda. We reached out to Antigua and Barbuda because on their catalog, it shows that there are 23 shipping containers of raw material to build bombs, similar to the MK-84, which is a 2,000-pound bomb that can destroy a whole residential building. Because there's growing support to impose an arms embargo on the Zionist occupation forces, they're trying to find other ways to get it. So they had this ship go to India, put these shipping containers on, and go to Cyprus. Before it even got on its way to Cyprus, we flagged it. Caribbean folks, Liz, BDS movement, and we put out information, our comrade Tamanisha as well, and people responded. They emailed the Antigua and Barbuda government demanding, hey, this is breaking the ICJ ruling of January 26th, right? Because it makes them complicit. They're not supposed to take any arms to help in this genocide. So they broke international law, and they were given a 24-hour notice. And instead of responding to that 24-hour notice, they turned off their radar and went incognito and turned off their lights. So we don't know where they are. We're asking Antigua and Barbuda to track them because they're the only place that can ask and can get their location. But we believe that they just went directly to Israel to deliver that. Again, breaking international law. So the Israelis need to be held accountable because they know what was heading their way, and the ship that was flying a flag that they didn't have permission to, because Antigua and Barbuda said, if you don't respond, we deflag the ship, which means that ship is not supposed to move and not supposed to take anything. So BDS is something that has been pretty effective, and Caribbean folks, we're doing some things about it. BDS, PAL Action, people need to be pushing their governments to break diplomatic ties. Why? Because if not, you're complicit with the government that commits genocide, which goes against the Geneva Convention, and it goes against the international law, right? It's quite clear what is being done. It's the most well documented genocide in modern day history. So no one can deny that. Now we need to hold our governments accountable so that they are not complicit, and make the Israeli government unable to continue to function. If we think about South African apartheid, and how it ended, it's not that the Dutch thought the South Africans were all of a sudden human. They did something similar to BDS, and they made it economically infeasible for the Dutch to continue colonizing. And so there needs to be an targeted economic sanctions and arms embargo on the Israelis, and then they need to be held accountable for the war crimes that were committed, from the soldiers all the way up to the leaders that were all complicit. Even if now they're saying that this is a genocide and this is bad, everyone needs to be held accountable.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and speaking about the fact that it's all being documented, I guess, people say like in the future this is something that there's gonna be trials and whatnot, but I think that like I don't want to wait for later. Like you said, we can't be comfortable. We have to find ways, like you said, to like actually stop them. And so These are very interesting points, and I'm going to be sharing the links to all those methods of action. But it is so concerning that, in an age where we have even more access to see these things, nothing is being done, and people, if anything, it almost feels like people are either feeling stuck or feeling helpless. But if anything, we have even more power, and so I really encourage everyone that's like watching and listening to you to take that to heart, because there are people that have, as a collective, been able to stop some of these shipments from coming out. And especially, I think I remember seeing that about the locations in the U.S. where these things are being built. So
Breakthrough
I think
News,
that
Breakthrough News
see.
published a map with all the locations of Elbit
Okay.
and any company that is complicit with the arms. So and they're in most states. So all y'all got a place to go
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I was gonna say the diaspora. There's more Puerto Ricans outside of Puerto Rico than in it, and that's, again, speaking to the colonialism that we experience. And the thing that I often think about too is that with this genocide, like, so many people, whether they're Puerto Rican or not, but just anyone realizing that if they can do it there, they can do it anywhere. If we allow them to do it there, they're gonna be able to do it anywhere. And so it's just this like constant thought, that people, I feel, aren't quite grasping, aren't quite getting, and again speaks to the comfort, of like the systems designed that way to kind of keep people in place or keep people from thinking that it could happen to them. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? Trying to think through, like, any other pieces of information or things that you want to share with everyone in terms of what's happening there?
Mira, mi gente, for the people that are like, oh, this has nothing to do with Borinquen, like we should just focus on us. There's a few things that I need to say to that. One, no country has ever liberated itself. It needs the support of other nations that support its independence. This
Yeah.
is this is how you get independence. It's called international solidarity. International solidarity is something tangible. It can look like many things, um, and uh, and we have examples of these all throughout the world. If you look at Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, that formed the Alliance of Sahelian States, kicked out the French, nationalized their banks, made their own passports, made their own flag, are creating their new bank system. Education is becoming free. They're starting to support the agriculture and develop for themselves. They took back the mines from the foreigners and are redistributing that wealth to their general population and build infrastructure. We have examples of what it looks like to actually decolonize, and we have this great Pan Africanist blueprint with these three nations taking the lead. And Burkina Faso is not that big, just so that people know, and people should look into that. So international solidarity, um, and the other thing is, like, there are literally direct connections between Borinquen and uh, uh, and Palestine. First of all, the Zionists have been, for the last 3 or 4 years, been talking about a Puerto Rico method. Now, what is the Puerto Rico method? Well, the Zionists have studied what the US did to Puerto Rico, and they said, we actually should do this to the Palestinians. Why is it called the Puerto Rico method? Because you give them your second class citizenship, so they'll get a passport, and Zionist Israeli passport, but they won't get any access to rights. They won't be able to vote, and so they studied what the U.S. did to Boricuas, and they want to use this framework to do to the Palestinians. That's one thing. Second thing, there was when they were protesting Vieques, right? From the bombs that were tested in Vieques were used in Palestine and are being used in Palestine. If for
Exactly.
people that don't know our history, which aren't our history is intentionally hidden from us, right? 2/3 of Vieques was forcibly taken by the U.S. Navy to be used for experimenting on things like Agent Orange, other military chemicals and weapons, which is why we have the highest rates of cancer in Vieques, right? And And all of these things were used in other countries, including Palestine. Um, so, and that idea of taking land forcibly and then forcing whoever stays there to have to listen to the constant bombardment and be exposed to chemicals. This is literally the reality that is being lived here. Now, that wasn't a genocide the way this is, but it is similar because the system being used is the same system. We have the same enemy, imperialism. Um, and not surprisingly, the US is founded on genocide, slavery, rape. All of these things are the building blocks of the Israeli settler colonial project. And so we have to understand this. The Palestinians also have a majority of their people outside in the diaspora, and we all deserve to go back. We all have a right to our homes and to go back to our land, and we should fight for the right to go back, whether or not we want to go back. We should fight for the people that want to stay there, and the right to go back whenever we can, and deal with that as a people, because we have a nation. We can be independent. We deserve sovereignty as any nation does, and the U.S. is not a solution for anything.
Thank you so much for saying that. That's something that I feel so many more Boricuas are starting to learn the history, and I've been seeing a lot more of that education and a lot more of that awakening to this reality. So just hearing that, it makes me want to like cry, because I feel like, I was born and raised in the US, so I literally was that propaganda my entire life. And when I finally woke up, it was such a shock, because I just had no idea. And I felt even angry with myself, because I said, like, how could I not have known this, And I think a lot of us kind of punish each other, like, oh, you should have known in the history. But like you said, they intentionally hid it from us so that we remain complicit, right? That we remain in the system that they created. So I hope that when people hear these words, they really connect with this. And we need to understand first and foremost that the more of us building that solidarity, the more we can actually achieve that goal. Thank you so much, Libre. I'm so glad we got a chance to connect on this. And yeah, again, any other time that you need to talk or anything you need to share, I'll be sharing that on my page. I really appreciate it. Gracias.